The question of suffering. Why do we suffer? This question is as old as humanity itself. No matter who we are, or where we come from, each of us has experienced moments of pain and disappointment. Sometimes it is the pain of the body and illness, fatigue, or the reality of aging. Other times, it is the pain of the heart, loss, rejection, or the sadness that comes when life does not unfold as we had hoped. Even when life seems smooth on the surface, we still encounter stress and unease. We worry about the future, we cling to the past, or we fear change that we cannot control. Suffering, in its many forms, seems to weave itself into the fabric of human life. Over 2,500 years ago, the Buddha turned directly to this universal question. Instead of looking outside to the gods, to fate, or to chance, he pointed us inward. He explained that suffering does not arise only from external conditions. It is not only the fault of the world, other people, or circumstances. Much of our suffering comes from the way we relate to our own body and mind. This was a revolutionary insight. It means that even though pain and difficulty are part of life, our relationship to them is not fixed. We are not helpless. By looking carefully at our experience, we can understand why we suffer and discover a path toward freedom. One of the most practical tools the Buddha gave us for this understanding is the teaching of the Five Aggregates, also called the Five Skandhas. These are like the 5 building blocks that make up who we think we are. They are form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Together, they create our sense of self and the world around us. At first, this may sound abstract. But the 5 aggregates are not a philosophy to be memorized. They are something we can observe directly in our daily life. Every thought, every feeling, every memory, and even every sensation in the body can be seen as part of these aggregates. For example, imagine you hear a harsh word from someone. Instantly, the body reacts, that is form. A wave of unpleasantness arises, that is feeling. You recognize it as an insult, that is perception. Anger or defensiveness begins to build, that is mental formation. And finally, awareness of the whole experience is present, that is consciousness. When we slow down and see in this way, we realize that our suffering in this moment does not simply come from the person's words. It comes from how all these aggregates interact within us, how we cling to them, identify with them, and take them as me or mine. This is the Buddha's insight. Suffering is not an unchangeable curse, but a process we can understand. By observing the aggregates, we begin to loosen our attachment. We see that these building blocks are not permanent, not fixed, and not truly who we are. And here lies the opening to freedom. Just as a storm eventually clears and reveals the open sky, when we look deeply into the nature of these aggregates, we begin to see suffering more clearly. And in seeing, we also begin to let go. This teaching is not something distant, locked away in ancient texts. It is an invitation for us to examine our own lives, here and now. With gentle awareness, we can begin to see the patterns of body and mind, and in that seeing, take the first step toward a more spacious, peaceful way of living. What are the 5 aggregates? A clear overview. When the Buddha spoke about the nature of who we are, he did not describe a permanent soul, a fixed self that exists unchanged throughout time. Instead, he pointed us toward a very practical way of understanding our existence. The teaching of the 5 aggregates, also called the 5 Skandhas in Sanskrit. The word aggregate simply means a collection, a heap, or a group of things that come together. Just as a house is built out of many parts, walls, windows, roof, and doors, the sense of I is also built from different elements. The Buddha identified 5 of these elements, and together they create the experience we call self. Let us look at them one by one. First, form, rupa. This refers to our physical body and all material existence. Our bones, our skin, the food we eat, the air we breathe, these are all part of form. It also includes the physical world around us, because the body cannot exist separate from it. Think of a wave in the ocean. The wave looks separate, but it cannot exist apart from the water. In the same way, our body is not isolated, it is part of the great web of matter and energy. Second, feeling, Vedana. Feelings here do not mean emotions like anger or joy, but rather the raw sensations that arise from contact with the world. They can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. For example, the taste of something sweet brings a pleasant feeling. A harsh word may give rise to an unpleasant one. Sometimes, like hearing the sound of distant traffic, the feeling is neutral, neither good nor bad. Feelings are like the colorings that paint our daily experience. Third, perception, Saj. Perception is the process of recognizing and labeling what we encounter. When you see a tree, perception tells you, this is a tree. When you hear a melody, perception remembers it as music. Without perception, our world would be a blur of raw sensations without meaning. It is like the mind's dictionary, giving names and shapes to experience. Fourth, mental formations, Saskra. This is perhaps the richest and most complex aggregate. Mental formations include our thoughts, intentions, emotions, and habits. When we act out of kindness, anger, or fear, these are mental formations at work. They are also the seeds of karma, because our intentions shape our actions, and our actions shape our future experiences. Think of mental formations as the winds that steer the ship of our life. Finally, consciousness, Vijnana. Consciousness is the awareness that arises when the senses meet the world. When the eye sees a color, when the ear hears a sound, when the mind thinks a thought, consciousness is there, registering the experience. It is not a fixed entity but a stream, constantly shifting as new experiences arise. Now, when we put all these 5 together, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness, we get the sense of me. It feels solid, as though there is a permanent person inside who is experiencing life. But when we carefully examine the aggregates, we see that each one is constantly changing. The body grows, ages, and shifts moment by moment. Feelings come and go. Perceptions change as we learn more. Mental formations rise and fall like waves. And consciousness, too, flickers with each new experience. The Buddha's insight is that because all of these are impermanent, the self that we cling to is also impermanent. We are not one fixed identity, but a flowing process. This can sound unsettling at first, but it is also liberating. If we are not locked into a fixed self, then change is possible. Growth is possible. Freedom is possible. So, the 5 aggregates are not just abstract categories. They are a mirror, showing us how we are made up. By observing them in our own life, when we eat, when we feel joy, when we face anger, we begin to understand how suffering arises, and how we can let go of it. Why the aggregates are not the self. The Buddha taught that the 5 aggregates, the body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, are all marked by 3 universal characteristics. These are impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. Let us take a moment to reflect on each of these. Impermanence, or anicca, means that everything we experience is in constant motion. Nothing remains the same. Think of the body. As children we grow, as adults we age, and over time, the body continues to change beyond our control. Every breath we take, every cell in our body, is shifting, transforming, and eventually fading away. Even the most joyful moments in life, a celebration, a kind word, a beautiful sunset, do not last. They arise, shine brightly for a while, and then pass. Unsatisfactoriness, or dukkha, points to the truth that because things are impermanent, they cannot offer us lasting satisfaction. We may think, if only I had this, if only I achieved that, then I would be happy forever. Yet when we do get what we want, the happiness often fades quickly, leaving us restless and searching again. Even pleasures can turn into discomfort. For example, eating a delicious meal feels wonderful at first, but if we keep eating beyond our needs, it soon becomes unpleasant. This cycle shows us that nothing conditioned, nothing bound up in the five aggregates, can bring unchanging peace. Not self, or anatta, is perhaps the most subtle and profound teaching. We often say, this is me, this is mine, this is who I am. But when we examine closely, we see that none of the five aggregates can truly be called a permanent self. The body does not follow our wishes. If it did, we would never fall ill, never grow old. Feelings do not obey us. Joy and sorrow arise on their own, like weather shifting in the sky. Thoughts and emotions appear, linger for a while, and then vanish, often without us even choosing them. Consciousness itself, the awareness that knows sights, sounds, and sensations, is always dependent on conditions. To see this clearly, imagine standing by a river. The water flows past, never the same from moment to moment. In the same way, the five aggregates flow continuously, always changing. And yet, because we cling to them, we suffer. We say, this body is mine, even as it ages and aches. We say, this happiness is mine, even as it slips away. We say, these thoughts are me, even though they shift and contradict each other. This clinging is like trying to grasp the flowing river with our hands. The harder we hold, the more it slips away. The Buddha pointed out that it is this clinging, this desperate attempt to hold on to what is changing, that is the root of suffering. When we identify ourselves so tightly with body, feelings, or thoughts, we create endless struggle. We fear loss, we resist change, and we chase after permanence in a world where nothing can stay the same. But this teaching is not meant to make us despair. On the contrary, it is meant to free us. When we begin to see impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self clearly, even just a little, we loosen our grip. We begin to live with greater ease. Instead of fighting the changing river, we learn to flow with it. Instead of clinging, we learn to appreciate each moment as it comes, knowing it too will pass. This insight is not about rejecting life, but about seeing life as it truly is. The body is precious, but it is not truly me. Feelings are vivid, but they are not truly mine. Thoughts and consciousness are powerful, but they are not fixed. When we see this, suffering begins to soften. A space of freedom opens, where wisdom and compassion can naturally arise. The aggregate of form, our physical existence. The Buddha began with the first aggregate, form, our physical body. This is the most tangible aspect of our existence. From the moment we are born until the moment we take our last breath, the body is with us, constantly changing, constantly reminding us of the law of impermanence. Think about it. As children, our bodies were small and fragile. Then we grew into youth, perhaps full of energy and vitality. With time, the body naturally moves toward aging, carrying lines, wrinkles, and aches that remind us of its temporary nature. None of us can stop this process, no matter how much effort we invest in exercise, medicine, or beauty treatments. The body is not fixed, it is a living process of change. And yet, we often cling to the body as if it were our permanent self. We look into the mirror and think, this is me. This face, this shape, this strength, this is who I am. But the truth is, what we call me today will not be the same me tomorrow. The body is influenced by countless conditions: what we eat, how we live, even the air we breathe. It is not truly under our control. Because of this attachment, suffering arises. When the body is young and strong, we fear losing that youth. When sickness comes, we resist it, asking, why me? When aging arrives, we may feel insecurity, regret, or sadness. And ultimately, we all face death, the final reminder that the body was never truly ours to keep. The Buddha did not teach this to frighten us, but to guide us toward wisdom. By seeing the body clearly, without illusion, we can live with greater peace. Imagine the body as a river. It is never the same from one moment to the next. The water flows in, the water flows out, yet we call it the river. In the same way, the cells in our body are constantly renewing, constantly breaking down and rebuilding. The you that you see today is not the same as the you from 10 years ago, or even last year. This understanding invites us to hold the body more lightly, not as something to deny or despise, but as something to care for wisely, without clinging. The Buddha often encouraged mindfulness of the body. Simple practices, like observing the breath, can anchor us in the present moment. With each inhalation and exhalation, we see that life is happening here, now. Or when we walk mindfully, step by step, we realize that this body is not a possession but part of nature itself, moving in harmony with the earth beneath our feet. In this way, mindfulness transforms our relationship with the body. Instead of saying, this is mine, I must keep it forever, we can say, this is a temporary gift, a vehicle for experiencing life. When pain or illness arises, we do not need to add layers of suffering through resistance or denial. We can simply recognize, this is the body's condition right now. And when the body feels healthy and strong, we can enjoy it without clinging, knowing that this too will change. By contemplating the aggregate of form in this way, we gradually loosen the grip of attachment. We begin to see the body as part of the natural flow of existence, not as a permanent self, but as one of the many changing processes that make up our experience. And with this insight comes freedom.
The freedom to live more peacefully, with gratitude for the body, but without fear of its inevitable changes.
The aggregates of feeling and perception, how we experience the world. The second and third aggregates are feeling and perception. Together, they form the bridge between our body and our mind, shaping how we experience the world moment by moment. Feeling, in the Buddhist teaching, does not mean emotions in the way we often use the word. Instead, it refers to the raw, immediate sensation that arises whenever we come into contact with something through our senses. Every sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, or thought brings with it a tone of experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. For example, the warmth of sunlight on your skin may feel pleasant. The sharp sting of a paper cut feels unpleasant. And the sound of a distant car engine may feel neutral, hardly noticed. Perception, on the other hand, is what labels and interprets these sensations. It is the mind's capacity to recognize. This is sweet. This is bitter. This is the sound of a bird. This is the face of a friend. Perception gives shape and meaning to what would otherwise be a flow of raw sensations. Consider this simple example. Two people taste the same piece of fruit. One person lights up, saying, "Ah, this is delicious, just the right amount of sweetness." Another grimaces, saying, "This is too sour, I don't like it." The fruit itself has not changed. The difference lies in perception, shaped by memory, preference, and expectation. When we look closely, we see how easily we get caught in this dance of feelings and perceptions. A pleasant feeling arises, we want more of it, and so craving is born. An unpleasant feeling arises, we want to push it away, and so aversion appears. Even neutral feelings, which make up much of daily life, can lead to dullness or inattention when we overlook them. In this way, our constant reactions to feelings and perceptions become the threads that weave the fabric of our suffering. The Buddha taught that freedom begins when we turn toward these experiences with mindfulness. Instead of being swept away by craving or aversion, we pause and notice. This is a pleasant feeling. This is an unpleasant feeling. This is neutral. By naming and observing the feeling as it is, without clinging or rejecting, we begin to loosen the grip of reactivity. The same applies to perception. When we see how our interpretations shape reality, we can begin to question them. Is this person truly my enemy, or is that only how I am perceiving them in this moment? Is this experience truly unbearable, or is that my mind amplifying it with judgment? This gentle questioning creates space for wisdom to arise. A helpful metaphor is the sky and the weather. Feelings are like the ever-changing weather. Sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, sometimes gray and unremarkable. Perception is like the lens through which we view the weather, rose-tinted, cloudy, or clear. But the sky itself, vast and open, is not bound by the passing clouds. In the same way, our deeper awareness is not limited by feelings and perceptions, though they constantly move across it. Through mindfulness, we begin to see that feelings are not commands we must obey. Perceptions are not ultimate truths we must cling to. They are simply processes arising, changing, and fading, like waves on the surface of the sea. With this insight, balance naturally grows. We no longer chase after every pleasant sensation or run from every unpleasant one. Instead, we rest in a more spacious awareness, free to respond wisely, rather than react blindly. This is the gift of understanding feeling and perception in the light of the Dharma. We discover that peace does not come from controlling what we experience, but from changing our relationship to the experiences themselves. The aggregate of mental formations, the power of habit and intention. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This refers to the countless thoughts, emotions, and tendencies that continuously arise within us. Some of these are brief and passing, like a small ripple on the surface of a pond. Others are deep-rooted, like powerful currents that shape the direction of our entire life. Every word we speak, every action we take, and even every thought we hold, whether we realize it or not, arises from these mental formations. In Buddhist teaching, they are often described as seeds. Each intention, each attitude, is like a seed planted in the soil of the mind. When conditions are right, those seeds sprout and influence how we think, how we feel, and how we behave. Some of these seeds are wholesome: compassion, patience, generosity, and wisdom. When we water them, they grow stronger, and our life naturally becomes more peaceful, more open, and more harmonious. But other seeds are unwholesome: anger, jealousy, greed, or resentment. If we keep watering these seeds, if we feed them with our thoughts and actions, they too will grow, and eventually they can take over the garden of the mind. To make this easier to picture, think of your mind as a garden. Within it, every kind of seed has already been planted, both flowers and weeds. The question is, which ones will you water each day? If we keep watering the weeds of anger or craving, they grow tall and wild, and eventually, they choke the flowers. But if we choose instead to nourish the seeds of kindness, patience, and clarity, then over time, the garden transforms into a place of beauty and nourishment. This is why mindfulness is so essential. When we are mindful, we can see a negative seed as it begins to sprout before it grows too strong. For example, when anger arises, mindfulness allows us to notice, here is anger. It has just arisen in me. At that moment, instead of being swept away by it, we have a choice. We can take a breath, step back, and choose not to water that seed further. In doing so, we slowly weaken its power. On the other hand, when a wholesome seed arises, say, a moment of compassion, we can recognize it and give it our attention. Perhaps we smile, or we act kindly towards someone. That small act is like watering the flower of compassion. Each time we repeat this, the root of compassion grows deeper and more stable. This practice is not about suppressing or denying any mental formation. Anger, sadness, or fear are part of being human. Instead, it is about understanding and transforming them. Just as a gardener works patiently with the land, we too work patiently with the mind. Over time, what was once a place of chaos can become a place of balance. So it is helpful to pause and reflect. What seeds am I watering each day? Are my daily actions strengthening patience or irritation? Generosity or selfishness? Mindfulness or distraction? Each small choice shapes the direction of our life, just as each drop of water nourishes either the weeds or the flowers. By nurturing wholesome mental formations, we are not only reshaping our own lives but also creating ripples that touch everyone around us. A calm and compassionate mind naturally brings calm and compassion into families, communities, and the world. In this way, the aggregate of mental formations is not a burden, it is a profound opportunity. It reminds us that every moment carries the potential for transformation. By tending carefully to the seeds within us, we slowly shape the kind of life, and the kind of world, that reflects wisdom and compassion. The aggregate of consciousness, the stream of awareness. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness. When we hear this word, it may sound mysterious, but in the Dharma it simply means awareness. It is the knowing that arises whenever a sense organ meets its object. When the eye meets a color, visual consciousness arises. When the ear meets sound, auditory consciousness arises. When the tongue meets flavor, taste consciousness arises. And when the mind meets a thought, mental consciousness arises. In this way, consciousness is not one single thing that exists on its own. It is more like a continuous flow of experiences, moment by moment. You can imagine it as a stream of water, each drop is fresh and new, yet when we look at the stream, it appears continuous. Consciousness is like this, constantly arising, changing, and dissolving. Now, many people wonder, if consciousness is always flowing, does that mean there is a permanent self behind it? The Buddha was very clear, consciousness is not a fixed soul. It is a process, not a solid entity. Just as a flame depends on fuel to keep burning, consciousness depends on conditions, on sense organs, sense objects, and attention. When these conditions are absent, consciousness does not appear. Let us reflect with a simple example. Imagine you are watching a movie on a screen. The images keep changing rapidly, frame by frame, yet your mind experiences them as one continuous story. Consciousness works in a similar way. Each moment of seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, or thinking arises and passes away. But because they flow so quickly, we mistake them for one unbroken self. Without mindfulness, this stream of consciousness becomes easily clouded. When the eye sees something pleasant, craving arises. When the ear hears something harsh, aversion arises. And when the mind churns with thoughts, confusion often follows. In this way, consciousness alone does not guarantee wisdom, it simply provides the awareness in which our habits play out. But with mindfulness, something very different becomes possible. Consciousness can become steady, clear, and luminous. Instead of being swept away by every sight or sound, we can rest in awareness itself. This is like watching the river from the bank, instead of being carried away by its current. Through meditation, we begin to see that consciousness is not an enemy to fight, nor a treasure to cling to. It is simply the field in which all experiences arise and pass. And as we watch carefully, we discover its true nature, impermanent, dependently arisen, and not self. This understanding frees us. When we no longer cling to consciousness as me or mine, we can meet each moment with gentleness and openness. Awareness becomes a mirror, reflecting everything just as it is, without distortion. So, as we contemplate the fifth aggregate, let us remember, consciousness is like a stream. It is always moving, always changing. When clouded, it binds us in confusion. When cultivated with mindfulness, it becomes a clear and luminous path to wisdom. Living with wisdom, seeing the aggregates clearly. When we take time to carefully observe the five aggregates, something begins to shift within us. We start to see that what we usually call self, this idea of me that we cling to so tightly, is not actually a solid, unchanging entity. Instead, it is a dynamic process, woven together moment by moment, always in motion. A helpful image is that of a rainbow. When you see a rainbow stretching across the sky, it looks real, vivid, and beautiful. Yet, when you try to grasp it, there is nothing to hold. It is the play of light, water, and perspective, a temporary appearance, without a fixed substance. In the same way, what we call I or me is like that rainbow, real in experience, yet empty of any permanent core. This insight is not meant to make us feel lost or insignificant. In fact, it does the opposite. When we see clearly that there is no rigid self to defend, no fixed identity to protect at all costs, a great relief enters the heart. We become less bound by fear, less entangled in clinging, and more open to compassion. Think about how much suffering arises from holding too tightly to "this is me, this is mine." We become upset when someone criticizes me, anxious when circumstances threaten what's mine, fearful when change comes to what we identify with. But if we understand the aggregates as passing processes, like clouds drifting across the sky, we are less shaken. Praise and blame, gain and loss, joy and sorrow, they still come and go, but we are not imprisoned by them. Instead of being trapped in the ups and downs of life, we begin to move with them more gracefully, like a boat that knows how to ride the waves rather than resist them. This is the practical freedom that the Dharma offers, not an escape from life, but a lighter way of living within it. And how do we cultivate this wisdom in daily practice? It does not require anything grand or complicated. In fact, it can be very simple. When you sit quietly, observe the body, notice its posture, the rising and falling of the breath, the sensations that come and go. When feelings arise, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, simply acknowledge them. This is a pleasant feeling. This is unpleasant, this is neutral. See how they change, how they never last. When thoughts appear in the mind, watch them as if watching clouds pass through the sky. They come, they linger for a while, and they fade away. There is no need to cling, no need to push away. And beneath it all, rest in awareness itself, that open, spacious knowing that is always present, like the sky behind the weather.
The more clearly we see in this way, the lighter we begin to live. Life still moves, challenges still appear, but we meet them with greater clarity and calm. Compassion arises naturally because we see that others, too, are carried by these same aggregates, facing the same shifting conditions of body, feeling, thought, and consciousness. So when we truly see the aggregates clearly, we are not left empty-handed. We are left with wisdom, with compassion, and with peace. Thank you for listening and watching. May this reflection bring lightness to your heart, clarity to your mind, and peace to your life. Please look forward to the next episode of the Buddha Light Podcast.